Right. So thank you for everybody for your patience. So for those that are just getting started, we have 8 people. There was about 20 people signed up, which is great for this, considering I didn't even really promote it or anything. But it was clearly a need. It came out of a series, a program that I basically put together of 4 classes, if you will, of 4 different main topics that I found that kept coming up over the years in dealing with people with EDS. And while everybody can be presented to 15 million times, I found that it was also important to give people the opportunity to not only share what I have learned, not that I have all the answers. So I wanted a platform that people could ask questions and really learn. I also found, and EDS Wellness was founded on the premise that, I didn't want just to talk to people. I wanted people just to be able to actually really engage and interact and learn by doing, whether it was at a conference or maybe virtually, which is also what we do. So this is the second webinar, and it came out of as I said, the first one, the first series, and it was class 3 or course 3 was the comorbid conditions. And that webinar went for over 2 hours because there were so many questions and people wanted to talk about it. So we had a lot left to discuss, and a lot of people really wanted to continue the dialogue to really just talk about the issues that they were having or the issues that we really didn't even get a chance to talk about. So before we officially get started, even though we are getting started, I first want to make sure that Dineo and Virginia, my panelists who are on here, get a chance to introduce yourselves. So can you guys introduce yourselves? Would you mind?
My name is Dineo Muja, and I am a summer intern for EDS Wellness.
That is wonderful. And we did a great interview last night on how her experience has been in the middle of a new nonprofit growing and my moving and being pretty much virtual. It's been an interesting learning curve for all of us. Virginia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Virginia Phillips. I'm an EDS hypermobility patient. I connected with Kendra some time ago. She knows that I am a mast cell activation syndrome patient advocate, and that's really how I've gotten involved in the EDS world. I was one of the first few that started pointing out that there are mast cells and we've got issues with them. It's nice to see that's changed in the EDS world. But in some respects, I'm also an EDS advocate because we all know that those 2 things go hand in hand. Outside of that, I'm an author, a speaker, and a coach. And really, I coach the health and wellness folks because I want our experiences working with them to be so much better.
Well, that's great. And we appreciate all that you do. I know I do. It helps me tremendously, both in EDS Wellness and outside of it. For those that are in the attendees, if you guys wouldn't mind, if in the comment section, and Dineo is going to do she's going to monitor the chat. So any questions that you have, this is interactive, but do put questions there. But also, please let us know what topics, comorbid condition topics, you want to discuss and go over specifically. I have a couple of things that I've written down to talk about based upon the last comorbid conditions webinar, but I want to make sure that we talk about the things that you have questions about, that we go over it, and that I'm able to provide resources afterwards if you need them. So please make sure that you ask questions, and the comments, and Dineo will make sure that we get them answered. So first thing, I don't see any comments just yet as far as questions or anything. So the first thing to make sure, and I'm going to get out my little drawing, is that I think one of the biggest things to discuss with comorbid conditions is that, and because EDS Wellness's mission and vision is to help people restore function and live well, and a lot of times EDS in and of itself isn't what is causing, I want to make sure that I'm careful how I say this, isn't what is causing the symptoms, because it's, a mutation, whatever it is. And yes, it is directly linked, but a lot of times the issues that we have stem from the comorbid conditions related to EDS, if that makes sense. So that doesn't mean that EDS doesn't cause it. It just means that a lot of times, whether it's the instability of the connective tissue around our joints then causes more inflammation because of the mast cells, or whatever it is, a lot of times the comorbid conditions are the ones that cause us the most problems. A lot of times those are the ones that we go to the doctor for. Those are the ones that are most perplexing, especially when you aren't familiar with all the links and you are wondering, how in the world do I have 20 different conditions? How am I so lucky that I have so many different things? And while, we always talk about that we're not that rare, and that, you have to think things that aren't so rare, like doctors are taught, to think horses, not zebras, when you hear hoofbeats. But in the same sense, though, sometimes it is something very simple when they think about it in terms of, are we so unlucky to have 20 different conditions, or is it really just something that might be underlying that links kind of all of it? And, especially when you know connective tissue and you understand it, it makes a lot of sense. What cart becomes what horse, I don't think any of us really know. EDS comes down to a lot of it, but there's also research that's coming out, and I don't know exactly what will come out, but I know there's research into looking into the epigenetic components of EDS. And there's genetic, and there's epigenetic, and there's predispositions that, were like a trigger that some people have, that maybe they would flip the switch if they have rheumatoid arthritis, but there's definitely a genetic predisposition there. And
Kendra, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm wondering if everybody on here knows what epigenetics is.
That's a good question. So let's ask. I wish people could wish I could invite them live. I'm going to go let's see if they comment. I want to make sure. I think you're right. I'm going to tilt my thing up a little bit, and I'm going to get my drawing. So if people would comment and let us know if, when we talk about epigenetic and genetic and predisposing factors and different things, and not that it's also important to understand that it's not a refined science, and there's a lot of research being done in the medical field, not just in our community, on all of this. There's a lot of things that we don't clearly understand yet, and that are quite different than what the medical world thought. For example, like the interstitium. I've brought this up several times, that all of a sudden this was the biggest organ in our body. And I don't think any one of us would have been really, it's summer 2018 in Cameron.
And I do think that's some of EDS. We like the hair is crazy.
Yeah, it's just, I've got my son, and then it's crazy, but it is summer, and I have 3 children. So, but yeah, so I think there's a lot that we don't know. So I want to make sure that we don't say anything to allude to something that hasn't been founded or proven or backed by research. It's more of just, there's a lot of questions that are out there, and a lot of things that the researchers in EDS are looking into, not just the gene for hypermobile EDS, but just to understand the links between all these comorbid conditions, because that was also one of the reasons why people got originally upset, because they didn't understand why the comorbid conditions weren't part of the diagnostic criteria. And the reason why is because we recognize them and they're part of the standard of care, but we don't know exactly why they're linked yet. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think make a lot of sense to us, like we talked about the interstitium and connective tissue is connected, but we have to, the way the world we work in is that, and we live in, is that we really have to know down to the why, and down to the molecular genetic level of the DNA of exactly what's happening in our cells everywhere, to understand why there's a link. So I think there's a lot of simplistic way to think about it. I think mast cells are one of those things that is very interesting to me for a lot of reasons. But and then somebody said, okay, Tracy said she knows what epigenetic is. So genetic is, for those that might not fully are clear, genetic is something that you inherit. It's in every single cell in your body. It's in the DNA. Epigenetic, there are predisposing factors that people seem to be heritable. For example, like autoimmune conditions, one in my family, like many of us, there seems to be a predisposing factor, and there's been a lot of research on that. But what exactly is it that links it to us? And then what happens is, why do some people get it, some people don't? Seems to be a switch that turns on based upon environmental, genetic, what they call epigenetic factors that happen, of course, in our lifetime, sometimes down to the womb in utero. They've had research on that too. So there's just a lot that we don't know.
And when you talk environmental factors, it can be things like stress and experiences, and not necessarily exposures to EMFs or those things.
Well, and stress and all that is your environment too. So if we're dealing with, if we all understand what EDS is and what it's not, I'm assuming that people do, and there's any questions they're welcome to ask. how it's different from hypermobility spectrum disorders, and how there are other hypermobility related conditions as well, and disorders. There's also inflammatory disorders that are linked to hypermobility, and also heritable connective tissue disorders that are linked to hypermobility too. I think there's over 200, 300 conditions that are associated with hypermobility, not just the collection of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So, and there's also a lot we don't know yet. There's people that have benign, they have hypermobility, but they're not symptomatic in the system.